The final assembly session of the council meeting was unlike anything in the organization's recorded history. For the first time ever, 3 members of the directorate appeared physically before the gathered delegates. Director Vane, Director Myros, and Director Sain stood on a newly built platform beside the Core 5's traditional seats. The symbolism was clear to everyone. The hidden rulers were no longer completely hidden. Ambassador Theron called the session to order. His mouth parts clicked with barely hidden discomfort. He said this assembly session would address humanity's application for full membership in the Galactic Council, as well as proposed changes to council procedures. The chamber was packed beyond capacity. Delegates from regional seats were standing in the walkways. Daniel's group had grown to include 23 species, nearly half of all regional seat members. Director Vane spoke first. His ancient voice carried across the big room. He said the directorate had reviewed humanity's application and the concerns raised by Captain Harris and his delegation. After careful consideration, they had reached a decision. The chamber held its breath. Everyone waited. Director Vane said humanity was hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities. They would get a regional seat immediately, with the possibility of moving up based on merit and contribution. Cheers erupted from Daniel's group members. Even some of the previously neutral delegates clapped. But Director Vane was not finished. He said furthermore, the council would put in place new transparency measures. Beginning immediately, regional seat delegates would have the right to ask for decision reviews. A committee of rotating regional seat members would be created to look at Core 5 decisions and give recommendations. Director Myros added that his pillar of light pulsed with each word. Additionally, the directorate committed to quarterly public appearances before the assembly. They would answer questions submitted in advance and provide guidance on council direction. It was more than Daniel had dared hope for. Lisa squeezed his hand. Her eyes were bright with victory, but Director Sain's shadow voice added a warning. These changes came with expectations. Humanity must show that disruption could lead to building, not destroying. They must prove that their vision of cooperative government could work at a galactic scale. Daniel stood to address the assembly. He said they accepted that challenge, and they invited all regional seat species to join them in building a better council, one where every voice mattered, not just the loudest or the oldest. The Peltharian delegate stood. He said the Peltharian people supported these reforms and welcomed humanity to the council. One by one, members of Daniel's group rose, adding their voices to the movement. Even some species who had not joined the group expressed support for the new transparency measures. The Core 5 looked uncomfortable, especially the Zenthari and Draxan representatives. They had lost some of their absolute authority. But Councillor Mireth of the Velmori appeared pleased. Her galaxy eyes were shining with approval. After the formal votes were recorded and humanity's membership was made official, the assembly ended. Daniel and his team were immediately surrounded by well-wishers and delegates eager to discuss future cooperation. Amy pushed through the crowd to reach them. She said they did it. They actually changed the council. Lisa corrected her. They started the change. The real work began now. Jake nodded toward the directorate members who were being approached by various delegates. He said, "Look at that. When was the last time anyone could just walk up and talk to them?" Amy said, "Never." This was completely unprecedented. As the celebrations continued, Daniel noticed Councillor Mireth approaching. He excused himself from the other delegates and moved to meet her. He greeted her with respect. She replied warmly, calling him Captain Harris, or should she say Delegate Harris. He would need to select a formal title for his council position. Daniel admitted he had not thought that far ahead. Mireth said he should. He had made powerful friends today, but also powerful enemies. The directorate had agreed to change, but change made many uncomfortable. There would be resistance. Daniel said they were ready for it. Mireth's expression grew serious. She said there was something he should know. The 7th directorate pedestal, the one that was empty when they met with the directorate. It belonged to the Enthal, the species that disappeared 5,000 years ago. Daniel asked what happened to them. Mireth said no one knew for certain. But there were theories. Some believed they tried to reform the directorate from within and were eliminated. Others thought they discovered something that made them abandon the council entirely. She paused. The Directorate allowed humans to succeed where the Enthil failed. Ask yourself why. The question haunted Daniel as he returned to his team. Why had the Directorate yielded? Was it because humanity had built a group they could not ignore? Or was there another reason? That evening, the human delegation gathered in their rooms for a final discussion before returning to the USS Horizon. Lisa said, while reviewing her notes, that they had been given a seat at the table. But Mirith's warning was valid. They needed to be careful about their next moves, Jake agreed. The Directorate gave them some transparency, but they were still the ultimate power, and humans did not know 4 of the 7 members' identities. Daniel decided they should keep building their group. They would make the regional seats too strong to ignore. They would share technology, forge partnerships, and prove that cooperative government worked. Amy pulled up star maps showing Council space. She said there were over 600 species in Council space. Only 17 had regional seats. What about all the others? Lisa said with a slight smile that was phase 2. First, they reformed the Council. Then they expanded it to actually represent everyone. Amy said they were talking about a revolution. Daniel corrected her. He said they were talking about evolution. The Directorate built something impressive 10,000 years ago, but it was time for it to grow up. The next morning, the USS Horizon left Valoria Prime with humanity's first official council representative aboard. As they entered hyperspace, Daniel stood on the bridge, watching the stars blur into ribbons of light. Karen reported an incoming message from Earth. Priority 1 from the Secretary General. Daniel told her to put it through. The Secretary General's face appeared on screen. She was barely containing her excitement. She said she just received the official notification. Congratulations on achieving full membership. Daniel thanked her, though he warned her the work was just beginning. The Secretary General said she was aware. She was also aware that he had apparently sparked the biggest political movement in the Council's history. The media feeds from Valoria Prime were buzzing with talk of reform and transparency. Some were calling him a revolutionary. Daniel smiled. He said he preferred appropriately disruptive, as Director Kell put it. The Secretary General said whatever he called it, he had put humanity on the map. The Council would never be the same. After the call ended, Jake moved to stand beside Daniel. He asked what happened now. Daniel thought about the empty pedestal, about the Enthil who had disappeared, about the 4 unknown Directorate members, about the hundreds of species without representation. He thought about all the challenges ahead. He said now they got to work. The Council just learned that humanity asked uncomfortable questions and did not accept bad answers. They should make sure the Council never forgot it. Lisa joined them at the window. Her computer tablet already showed plans for group expansion and reform proposals. She said she had been analyzing the Council's charter. There were loopholes they could use, past examples they could reference, and allies they could recruit. If they played this right, in 10 years the Council could look completely different. Jake asked what if they played it wrong. Lisa said then they would be another cautionary tale like the Enthil, but she did not plan on disappearing. Daniel said firmly none of them did. Humanity did not come this far just to accept things as they were. They were going to keep pushing, keep questioning, keep demanding better. As the Horizon jumped to faster speeds, carrying humanity's delegation back toward Earth, Daniel felt the weight of responsibility and the excitement of possibility in equal measure. They had opened a door that had been sealed for 10,000 years. Where it led, no one knew, but for the first time in the Galactic Council's long history, that door was open. And humanity intended to walk through it, bringing as many other species as possible along the way. The Council would never be the same. And that, Daniel thought, was exactly the point. The next 2 days were a blur of secret meetings and careful talks. Daniel found himself speaking with delegates from species he had never heard of. Each one had their own complaints about the Council's power structure, the Peltharians, whose attempts to speak at meetings were always ignored, the Yithrim, whose trade routes had been taken away to help the Core 5, the Karathi, whose scientific discoveries were stolen without giving them credit. The list got longer with each meeting. Lisa was extremely helpful. Her mind found patterns of bad treatment and organized the growing group into a real force. By the second evening, they had promises from 14 regional seat species to support humanity's request for full membership. But they needed more than just moral support. Jake said during a planning session in their protected rooms that they needed leverage. The Core Five would not care about speeches and appeals. They needed to believe that saying no to humanity would cost them something. Amy agreed. She said Jake was right. But what did humans have that the Core Five wanted? Daniel had been thinking about this. He said information and technology. Earth had developed several new things on its own, because they were not part of the Council's technology sharing programs. Human fusion reactor designs, artificial intelligence systems, and medical advances. The Core Five assumed they could access all of this once humans were members. But what if humans made it clear they would only share with their friends? Lisa said that was risky. It could make the Core Five more hostile. Daniel argued back. He said, or it could make them realize humans were not beggars asking for permission. They were a civilization with something valuable to offer. If the Core Five wanted it, they needed to treat humans as equals. The plan was put into action immediately. Through Amy's network, word spread among the regional seats that humanity was willing to share technology with partners, not masters. Within hours, 5 more species joined their group, but they still needed to reach the Core Five directly. The chance came unexpectedly. A Velmori diplomat named Counselor Mareth asked for a private meeting. The Velmori were known for their diplomatic skills and for being the most independent of the Core Five. Counselor Mareth was a graceful being who looked almost human except for her silver skin and eyes that held galaxies inside them. She met Daniel and Lisa in a private garden in the diplomatic area, far from cameras and listening devices. Mireth said their activities had not gone unnoticed. They were organizing a group against the Core Five's decision. Daniel met her gaze steadily. He said they were organizing support for humanity's full membership. If that went against the Core Five, perhaps the Core Five should change their position. Mireth's expression was hard to read, but something that might have been approval flickered in her cosmic eyes. She said the Velmori appreciated boldness. They had supported human membership from the beginning, but they were only one voice among 5. Lisa said, then help us reach the others. Let us present our case directly. Mireth said the Core Five did not meet with regional seat applicants. It was not the way things were done. Daniel said protocol seemed designed to keep power rather than serve fairness. Mireth was quiet for a long moment. She said humans understood the situation better than most species did when they first arrived. Very well. She could not arrange a formal meeting, but she could make sure all the Core Five were present at tomorrow's assembly session. What they did with that opportunity was up to them. After she left, Lisa looked at Daniel with concern. She asked if they were going to disrupt the assembly session. Daniel said they were going to make the Core Five listen, one way or another. The next morning, the big room was packed. Word had spread through the regional seats that something important was about to happen. All of Daniel's group members were there, positioned carefully throughout the chamber. The session began normally with routine matters being discussed. But when there was a pause in the proceedings, Daniel stood up from the observation platform. He called out that he requested permission to address the assembly. His voice carried across the huge chamber. A Zenthari official, not Ambassador Theron, responded with barely hidden anger. He said observation members did not have speaking rights. Daniel said then perhaps it was time to change that rule. He stepped forward. Humanity had been patient. They had followed the rules, respected traditions, and waited for permission to join a council that claimed to represent the galaxy. But they had learned that representation was fake. The chamber erupted in voices. The Core Five, seated at the center, watched with different looks of surprise and displeasure. Daniel continued. The Galactic Council was not governed by its members. It was governed by 5 species who had veto power over all decisions. And those 5 answered to an even smaller group, the Directorate, whose existence was hidden from most members. The voices became shouts. Several regional seat delegates stood in support. Others looked shocked at the public revelation. Ambassador Theron rose. His mouth parts clicked in anger. He said Daniel was breaking diplomatic rules and spreading unproven claims. Daniel challenged him. Then prove them wrong. Let the Directorate appear before the Assembly. Let them explain why they ruled in secret while pretending the council was democratic. A Draxan representative hissed. Their snake-like body coiled in anger. They said this was outrageous, but Counselor Mireth stood. Her silver form radiated calm authority. She said the human raised good concerns. Perhaps it was time for transparency. The Silthene representative, a being of shifting shadows, spoke in a voice like whispers. The Directorate maintained order. Without their guidance, the council would break into chaos. Lisa stood beside Daniel. She said, or perhaps it would become what it claimed to be, a true council of equals. The Corvin representative, speaking with the unified voice of their group mind, addressed the chamber. The humans had shown courage by speaking truth. They moved that humanity's application for full membership be brought to immediate vote. Myreth said seconded immediately. The chamber descended into chaos. Delegates were shouting both in support and opposition. The Core Five were talking urgently among themselves. Jake's voice came through Daniel's hidden earpiece. He said he was picking up encrypted communications between the Core Five and an unknown source. Someone was giving them instructions. The Directorate, Daniel realized. They were responding in real time. Ambassador Theron raised his arms, calling for order. When silence finally fell, he spoke with cold formality. The Core Five would take a break to consider the Corvin motion. This session was stopped until tomorrow. As the delegates began to leave, Amy rushed to Daniel's side. She said that was either brilliant or suicidal. They would know which in 24 hours. Daniel watched the Core Five exit through their private corridors. Somewhere behind those walls, the real rulers of the galaxy were deciding humanity's fate without ever speaking to them directly. But for the first time since arriving at Valoria Prime, Daniel felt like they had a fighting chance. They had exposed the truth. They had gathered allies. They had shown that humans would not simply accept being told no without explanation. The Directorate had ruled in secret for 10,000 years. They were used to being obeyed without question. They were used to species accepting their place in the hierarchy without complaint. They were not used to humans, and that, Daniel hoped, would make all the difference. The hours after Daniel's disruption of the assembly were tense. Some regional seat delegates came to the human delegation with words of support. Others stayed away, clearly afraid of being connected with troublemakers. That evening, as Daniel reviewed coalition messages with his team, an unexpected message arrived. It had the seal of the Directorate itself. The message said Captain Daniel Harris, Dr. Lisa Campbell, and Commander Jake Morrison were invited to appear before the Directorate Council at 8 o'clock that evening. Come alone. This invitation could not be refused. Amy's face went pale. She said no one got called directly by the Directorate. This was something that had never happened before. Jake asked if they should refuse. Lisa pointed out the message said they could not refuse. And honestly, this might be their only chance to speak directly to the people who actually made decisions. Daniel made his choice. They would go. He told Jake to have the Horizon on standby. If they did not report in within 2 hours of the meeting time, assume the worst and get their group members to safety. At the chosen hour, a private transport arrived. It was piloted by beings in smooth silver suits that showed nothing about what species they were. The transport took them deep into the core of Valoria Prime. Through sections of the station Daniel had not known existed. They went down into a chamber that seemed to exist outside normal space. The walls shimmered with impossible shapes. The lighting came from no visible source. 7 pedestals stood in a circle. 6 of them had beings sitting or standing on them, beings of immense presence and power. Director Vane of the Zenthari was there. His ancient shell was covered in glowing symbols that pulsed with power. Director Myros of the Corvins appeared as a pillar of light containing thousands of connected minds. Director Sane of the Silthene was barely visible, a shadow that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. 3 others were there too. A being of pure crystal structure that gave off cold intelligence, a creature that appeared to be made of living metal, its form constantly changing, and something that looked like a contained black hole, a point of absolute darkness that bent light around it. The 7th pedestal was empty. Director Vane spoke. His voice carried the weight of thousands of years. He said humans had disrupted the Council's order. They had revealed secrets that were meant to stay hidden. Explain why they should not have humanity expelled from Council space entirely. Daniel stepped forward. He refused to be scared. He said because those secrets were lies that damaged the very purpose of the Council. They claimed to represent all species equally, but they ruled as dictators. They spoke of unity while forcing submission. The crystal being said bold words for a species that had barely left its home system. He was Director Kell of the Exor. Humanity was a baby compared to them. What made humans think they understood the complexities of galactic government? Lisa said age did not equal wisdom, and complexity did not justify lying. They had hidden their existence because they knew if the regional seed species understood the truth, they would demand change. Director Myros's pillar of light pulsed. He said they maintained order. Before the Directorate, the galaxy was full of endless wars. They created the Council to bring peace. Jake countered that they created the Council to gather power. Peace through domination was not peace. It was just a pause between potential rebellions. Director Sane's shadow voice whispered through the chamber. And yet peace had held for 10,000 years.
How many lives had been saved by their guidance?
Daniel asked how many civilizations had been held down. How many new ideas had been stopped? How many species had been kept weak and dependent on Directorate technology, trade routes, and approval? The metal being shifted. Its voice was like grinding gears. He was Director Tane of the Mekros. Their accusations suggested humans believed they could govern better. Them, a species that still fought among itself, that nearly destroyed its own planet through pollution, that had existed in space for less than 100 years. Daniel said humans did not claim to be perfect, but they believed in the right of species to decide their own futures. They believed in transparency and accountability, and they believed the Council should actually be what it claimed to be, not a fake show for their amusement. The black hole being spoke. Its voice seemed to come from every direction at once. He was Director Wraith of the Voidborn. Humans spoke of rights and beliefs, but they had not answered the basic question. What happened when species disagreed? When their interests conflicted? When their ideas were incompatible? Democracy among thousands of species led to gridlock and eventually to violence. Lisa said maybe, but that was their choice to make. The Directorate had decided they knew better than everyone else, that they had the right to rule in secret. But who gave them that right? Who held them accountable? Director Vane's symbols pulsed angrily. They founded the Council. They created the infrastructure. They established the peace. That gave them the right, Daniel said no firmly. That gave them a legacy, a responsibility. But it did not give them the right to rule forever without question. True leadership was not about keeping control. It was about helping others to govern themselves. The chamber fell silent. The Directorate members seemed to talk without words, their minds touching across dimensions Daniel could not see. Finally, Director Sane spoke. Humans asked dangerous questions, questions that could destroy 10,000 years of stability. Lisa replied, or questions that could transform the Council into something better. Director Kell's crystal form rang like a bell. They could destroy humanity, their species, their world. They had the power, Daniel agreed. Yes, they did. And if they chose that path, they would prove everything humans said about them. They would prove they were tyrants, not leaders. And every species in the regional seats would know it. Jake added that their group was already spreading the truth about the Directorate. If they disappeared, it would only confirm suspicions. The Directorate would face questions they could not silence. Director Myros pulsed thoughtfully. Humans were using their own structures against them. The transparency they allowed in regional seat communications, the relationships between species that they encouraged for diplomatic stability. Humans had turned their own systems into weapons, Daniel corrected him. They had used the truth. That was not a weapon. It was a foundation. Director Tane shifted into a new shape. The humans spoke well, but words were easy. If they were to allow humanity full membership, if they were to begin changing the Council as humans suggested, what would humans offer in return? Lisa said everything. Their technology, their knowledge, their perspective. Humanity had always progressed through cooperation and innovation. They would share all of it, freely, with all Council members, not just the Core Five, everyone. Director Wraith's void seemed to deepen, and humans would submit to Council laws. Council oversight, Daniel said, as long as those laws and that oversight applied equally to everyone, including the Directorate. No more secret rules, no more hidden power structures. Full transparency. The Directorate fell silent again, thinking. When they finally spoke, it was Director Vane who delivered their decision. He said they could not give humans what they asked. The revelation of the Directorate's full operations would make the Council unstable. But they acknowledged that change was inevitable. Humanity would be granted full membership with a regional seat. Furthermore, The Core Five would create a new system, allowing regional seats to ask for review of decisions they believed were unfair. Daniel said that was not enough. The directorate needed to be accountable. Director Sane whispered that in time, perhaps. But change had to come slowly or it would bring chaos. They would make this compromise. The directorate would begin appearing at quarterly assembly sessions. They would answer questions within limits. It was a beginning. Daniel looked at Lisa and Jake. It was not everything they wanted, but it was more than any other species had achieved in 10,000 years. Daniel said they accepted. But they would continue pushing for more transparency. Director Kell's crystal laughter rang through the chamber. They expected nothing less from humans. Humans were, as they had learned, appropriately disruptive. As they were taken back to their rooms, Lisa spoke quietly. She said they did not win. Daniel agreed. No, but they moved things forward. And that was enough for now. Over the next 3 days, Daniel and his team attended assembly sessions, diplomatic parties, and cultural meetings. But their real work happened in secret. Lisa gathered information and Amy introduced them to delegates from other regional seats. One evening, they met with Ambassador Kelvin. He was a Thoriax representative. His species had been part of the Council for 200 years. He was a large creature with crystal-like skin that made rainbow patterns when light hit it. Kelvin said if they wanted to know about the true power structure, they needed to understand the directorate. Daniel asked what the directorate was. Kelvin's crystals became dimmer. He said it was not talked about in official meetings. The Core Five acted like they were equals who voted on things, but in truth, they were just managers. The real decisions came from the directorate. This was a group of ancient beings who founded the council over 10,000 years ago. Jake almost dropped his drink. He asked if they were 10,000 years old and still alive. Kelvin said some were original members. Others had replaced earlier ones. The directorate had 7 individuals. They represented the 7 species that first met and created the council. Only 5 of those species still held core seats. The other 2 lost their positions through bad luck or bad choices. Lisa leaned closer. Her mind was working fast. She asked if the Core Five were just middle managers. Kelvin said exactly. They carried out the directorate's wishes, but they also had some freedom. Think of them as governors serving an emperor. They had power, but not ultimate power. Daniel asked why keep this secret. Kelvin's crystals flashed red. He said because it kept up the illusion of democracy. If the younger species knew they were being ruled by ancient dictators, there would be rebellions. The council would break apart. By spreading power across the Core Five, it looked more fair and distributed. Amy nodded. She said she had heard rumors about this, but never confirmation. She asked who these directorate members were. Kelvin said he knew of 3. Director Vane of the Zinthari had held his position for 6,000 years through genetic treatments that kept him young. Director Myros of the Corvans was a collective consciousness that lived in multiple bodies. And Director Sane of the Silthian was an energy being who existed partly outside normal space and time. Lisa asked about the other 4. Kelvin said they were unknown to him. The directorate valued secrecy above everything. Some people said they never appeared in physical form at all. They only communicated through encrypted quantum channels. Daniel took in this information. He asked what happened to the 2 species that lost their core seats. Kelvin's entire body seemed to darken. He said the Makari and the Enthil. Both were founding members of the council. The Makari challenged the directorate's authority 8,000 years ago. Within 100 years, their civilization collapsed from within. Economic punishments, trade blocks, and secret rebellions funded by unknown sources destroyed them. They still existed, but as a regional seat with no power. Daniel asked about the Enthil. Kelvin said they disappeared completely. 5,000 years ago, they held one of the 7 directorate positions. Then over 1 generation, their entire species vanished from known space. Their worlds were found empty. Their ships were abandoned. No one knew what happened, but everyone understood the message. Do not go against the directorate. The room felt cold even though the temperature was controlled. Daniel looked at his team and saw his own worry in their faces. Jake asked Kelvin why he was telling them this. The Thoriax's crystals pulsed thoughtfully. He said because humanity was disruptive. Humans asked questions the Core Five did not like. They challenged assumptions. They had technology that developed on its own, which meant they were not completely dependent on council systems. Some regional seat members believed humanity could be the spark for change, but they needed to understand what they were fighting against. Before Daniel could answer, Amy's communicator beeped. She checked it and her face went pale. She said they needed to leave immediately. They hurried through the corridors back to their rooms. Once inside, Amy turned on a portable security device that blocked surveillance. She said she just got word from a contact in the Corvin delegation. The Core 5 were holding an emergency secret session about humanity right now. Lisa pulled out her tablet. She asked if they could access it. Amy said no, but her contact would share the outcome. This was not good news. 3 of the Core 5 wanted to deny Earth's application for full membership. They wanted to keep humans as observers forever. Daniel asked which 3. Amy said the Zenthari, the Silthene, and the Draxons. The Corvins were neutral. The Velmori actually supported humanity. Jake paced the room. He said so they had 1 supporter, 1 neutral, and 3 opposed. That was a recipe for rejection. Lisa wondered aloud why the Draxons opposed them. Humans had barely talked to them. Amy showed an image of a Draxon. It was a snake-like creature with multiple arms and glowing patterns on its scaled body. She said the Draxons were the Council's military enforcers. They did not like wildcards. Humanity's military strength made them nervous. Humans went from basic rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than 100 years. That kind of fast progress was seen as unstable. Daniel asked about the Zenthari. Amy said Ambassador Theron answered directly to Director Vane. Whatever the Directorate wanted, the Zenthari did. If Vane opposed humanity, it was because the Directorate opposed humanity. Lisa stood up. Her mind was clearly working through the problem. She said they needed to change the Directorate's mind, or at least convince enough of the Core 5 to overrule their guidance. Amy said that had never happened in recorded history. Daniel replied then they would make history. Kelvin said humanity was disruptive. They should use that. They needed to find allies among the regional seats and present a united front. If enough species demanded human inclusion, the Core 5 would have to listen. Jake looked doubtful. He said they were talking about organizing a group in less than a week. The full membership vote was in 6 days. Daniel said then they better get started. He told Lisa he needed a list of every regional seat species that had been ignored or treated badly by the Core 5. He told Amy to use her contacts to set up meetings. He told Jake to coordinate with the Horizon. He wanted full defensive protocols ready. If this went wrong, they might need to leave quickly. As his team left to do their jobs, Daniel stared out the window at the shining towers of Valoria Prime. Somewhere in those buildings, ancient beings were deciding humanity's future without ever talking to them directly. That was about to change. Daniel might not have thousands of years of experience. He might not have ancient wisdom or vast cosmic powers, but he had something the Directorate had forgotten about. He had the stubborn human refusal to accept injustice, the unwillingness to bow to bullies, the determination to fight for what was right even when the odds seemed impossible. The Directorate thought they could control humanity like they controlled everyone else. They were about to learn they were wrong. Very wrong. Captain Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of his ship, the USS Horizon. He watched the colors of space swirl past the windows as they traveled faster than light. It had been 3 years since humans first met aliens, 2 years since Earth joined the Galactic Council as a trial member. Now they were finally going to the big meeting on a planet called Valoria Prime. Lieutenant Karen Wells looked up from her computer station. Her fingers moved quickly across the glowing screen. She said the official message was coming through. Daniel told her to put it on the main screen. An alien appeared on the screen. His name was Ambassador Theron. He was tall and looked like a giant insect. He was from a species called the Zenthari. His mouth parts clicked together when he spoke. Daniel had learned this was how they said hello in a formal way. Theron said the council welcomed them to Valoria Prime. Their group would watch the assembly meetings and learn how the government worked. He hoped this would help humans become full members. After the message ended, Daniel turned to his second-in-command. Commander Jake Morrison stood with his arms crossed. He looked like he did not trust what was happening. He said 3 years of being ignored, and now suddenly they wanted to show humans how things worked. Something felt wrong. Daniel agreed but kept quiet about it. Earth's government had worked hard for this chance. Dr. Lisa Campbell was their expert on alien politics. She had been studying council messages for months. She believed there were hidden layers to how the organization really worked. The horizon came out of hyperspace near Valoria Prime. Daniel could not believe what he saw. The planet was huge. Part of it was natural and part was built by aliens. It had rings of space stations around the middle like a silver crown. As they flew down toward the diplomatic area, Lisa came to the bridge. She was a woman in her early 40s. Her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. She told Daniel she had been looking at the Council's public records. There were 17 member species, but only 5 seemed to make the big decisions. The others were more like helpers. Jake said so it was not really a democracy. Lisa said it was complicated. The 5 main species were the Zenthari, the Corvins, the Silthine, the Draxans, and the Velmori. They were called the core seats. Everyone else had regional seats. Daniel frowned. He asked why nobody explained this before. Lisa said that was what they were there to find out. Their small shuttle landed in a bay surrounded by ships from across the galaxy. When they got off, they met a human woman named Amy Chen. She had been working with the Council for the past year. Amy welcomed them to Valoria Prime. She hoped they were ready for some shocking truths. Jake muttered that did not sound good. Amy smiled but looked worried. She said the Council was not what Earth's diplomats thought it was. They would see soon enough. She led them through hallways filled with aliens of every type Daniel could imagine. Some walked on legs, others floated in the air. A few rolled on special machines. The variety was amazing. They entered a huge room where delegates from across the galaxy had gathered. The 5 core seats were in the center, higher up than everyone else. The regional seats formed circles around them. The newest members, including the small platform for humans, were on the outer edge. Lisa whispered for them to notice the positioning. It was not just symbolic. The closer you were to the core, the more power you had. A Zenthari official called the meeting to order. The session started. For the first hour, Daniel watched as different species presented requests, complaints, and ideas. But he quickly saw a pattern. Every decision, no matter how small, needed approval from at least 3 of the core seats. Jake whispered that they had veto power. All of them. Lisa added that they could delay any discussion forever. She told them to look at a Peltharian delegate. He had been trying to speak for 20 minutes, and they kept ignoring him. Daniel felt a cold understanding settle over him. This was not a council of equals. This was a small group ruling everyone else while pretending to be fair. When the session ended, Amy took them to a private meeting room. She said now they saw it. The Galactic Council was controlled by the Core 5. Everyone else was just for show. Daniel asked why no one challenged this. Amy's face grew dark. She said because the Core 5 controlled the defense networks, the trade routes, and the communication systems. If you were not in their favor, your entire civilization could be cut off. It had happened before. Jake leaned forward. He asked what happened when humanity tried to become a full member. Amy said that was the real question. Humans would never get a core seat. Those were held by the oldest and most powerful civilizations. But they might get a regional seat with actual voting rights. The problem was the Core 5 had to all agree to it. Lisa pulled out a computer tablet. She said based on her analysis, at least 2 of them did not want humanity anywhere near real power. Daniel looked out the window at the shining towers of Valoria Prime. He said they needed to find out why, and they needed to find out who their friends were. Amy warned that would be harder than they thought. She said the real power in the council was not even in this building. The Core 5 answered to someone else, someone humans had not been told about yet. The room became very quiet. Daniel realized their mission had just become much more complicated than anyone on Earth had expected. There were secrets within secrets, powers hidden behind powers, and humanity had just walked into the middle of a game they did not fully understand. But Daniel had not come all this way to be a passive observer. If the council had secrets, he would uncover them. If there were hidden rulers, he would find them. And if the system was broken, he would do everything in his power to fix it. The question was whether the council would let him. Or whether asking too many questions would put Earth in danger. Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Humanity had arrived at the Galactic Council, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.